Okay, so welcome everybody to this Rainbodhi special event for the 12th International Trans Day of Visibility. My name's Bhante Akaliko. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a cisgender, queer Buddhist monk. I'm also the founder of Rainbodhi LGBTQIA+ Buddhist community. Today, I'd like to start by making some acknowledgements. One of the things that we do in Australia, colonised country, is to always acknowledge the custodians of the land which we are upon. So this is unceded Baramadigal land of the Darug Nation. And I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to all First Nations people everywhere. Today, I'd especially like to acknowledge the gender diverse people of our First Nations. I'd like to acknowledge the sister girls and brother boys of Australian and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. I'd like to acknowledge the diversity that persists in nations around the world, including the Katoi and Tondi of Thailand, the Fa'afafine of Samoa, the Two-Spirit people of North America, and the Hijira of India. There's always been gender diverse people in all cultures, everywhere, and there will be in the future. This is what it means to be human. I'd also like to acknowledge that there have been elders past and present, queer heroes, trans heroes who have fought for our human rights, including people like Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans community leader who was part of the Stonewall riots. And here in Sydney, Australia, people known as the 78ers, people who fought and protested in the very first Mardi Gras event here in Sydney. When it comes to this particular context of Rainbodhi and Buddhism, I'd like to acknowledge that Buddhism has a queer trans history. Gender diverse people are recognised in our early spiritual texts. And it's important to acknowledge too that those people also experience stigma and discrimination, something which continues today. I'd like to recognise the heroes of trans Buddhism, and I'm thinking particularly of Michael Dillon, who was the first medically assisted person to undergo transition in the West, and also the first Western person to be ordained in the Himalayan tradition, known as Lobsang Jivaka. One last group I'd like to acknowledge is those people around the world today who face challenges being visible because of oppression, criminalisation and violence. And I'd like to wish those people who have difficulty being themselves, challenges being themselves, I'd like to wish those people freedom, freedom from oppression, freedom from fear, and wish that those people can be themselves and be happy. So that's a long introduction from me. For the rest of this session, I'm going to hand over to our host, Rosie. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Rosie, who's going to be acting as moderator. And then she's going to introduce you to the rest of the panel and also tell you a little bit about Rainbodhi and the Trans Day of Visibility. So I'm going to read Rosie's bio because it's quite wonderful. Rosie is a senior, out and proud trans woman who spends her time writing, reading, thinking, and philosophizing with a Z, philosophizing on top of a hill in rural Mexico. She was born and raised in Ohio, where she left at her earliest opportunity to hitchhike around the world and later travel to Thailand, where she undertook her confirmation surgery. Thanks for sharing that with us, Rosie. Rosie is a human rights activist, and she's worked at a variety of occupations, including being a radio announcer. And also one of her greatest achievements, she says, is having been published in a variety of formats. So thank you to all our guests. Thank you, Rosie, for leading the show. And I wish you all the very best for your discussion.
It's my turn. Thank you. Okay, I have some introductory notes. Thank you for your patience. My name is Rosie, and as the moderator of this wonderful group of gender diverse humans, I would first like to thank Bhante Akaliko for being the inspiration for this group, and to you all for being so brave and forthright. So thank you. And we'll begin this program with a brief description of the Rainbodhi group. Rainbodhi is a spiritual friendship group for LGBTQIA+ Buddhists and an advocate for more inclusion and diversity in the broader Buddhist community, where everyone is welcome, regardless of age, race, gender, sexuality, or ability. Rainbodhi, whose name combines two words, rainbow, representing our diverse community, and Bodhi, the Buddhist concept of enlightenment, celebrates International Trans Day of Visibility with a special online session featuring trans, non-binary, and gender diverse Buddhists from around the world. International Transgender Day of Visibility, and the reason for this panel, is an annual event occurring on March 31st of each year, dedicated to celebrating transgendered people and raising awareness of discrimination faced by trans people worldwide, as well as a celebration of their contributions to society. So as we celebrate this Transgender Day of Visibility together, our hope is that we discover the joys of gender diversity and how Buddhism plays a positive role in the lives of our trans community. We will also learn about some of the challenges we face in walking this spiritual path and why it's important to make our communities safer and more inclusive spaces for trans Buddhists. And now I would like to introduce the participants of our panel with the bios that they have written for us, including their preferred pronouns, and feel free to wave as I read your bio. First, I'll introduce Lev Fresh White, who prefers he and him. And Lev is a love and compassion activist. He offers mindfulness. Now this says mediation. I think it means—
That's right. No,
mediation.
mindfulness and mediation, yes.
Okay, and diverse training as a tool for shifting towards a more authentic consciousness and passionate living. He teaches and writes about how unconditional love and self-compassion are the ultimate gateways to honoring and understanding others to help heal our communities and the planet. Teresa prefers she and her, and Teresa is a 41-year-old woman living in Berlin, Germany. She works as a medical professional specializing as a radiation oncologist. Teresa is a follower of the Theravada school of Buddhism, and she has an avid interest in early Buddhism and the early Buddhist texts. Next is Jacob, who prefers he and him. And Jacob is a Theravada practitioner following the Thai forest tradition of Ajahn Chah. And for meditation, he usually practices the instructions of Ajahn Brahm, but another main interest is doing death contemplation. He also likes reading early Buddhist texts and also volunteers for the European Buddhist organization, Samira, ASBL, helping others with social media. And he enjoys classic spaghetti westerns, dog walking, and green tea. So you've already met me, and I think that onto our general talking points would serve as a general guide, but not necessarily the only ones that we can discuss. So to get us started, here's the first general question I think might be a good place to start. And that would be, how does your trans identity impact your Buddhist identity, and vice versa? How would your Buddhist identity impact your trans identity? I think that's an excellent place to start. So I'm just going to let people jump in. I think that's the best way to do it instead of calling on people. So I relinquish the floor to Jacob, Fresh, or Teresa. Go ahead. How about you? I'm looking at you, Fresh. What do you think, bro?
Wait, you weren't going to call on anybody.
Oh, sorry, no pressure, Matt. Okay, you seem like you're ready to talk. Anybody who wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. But what we can't have is a moment of silence. Teresa, would you feel like saying something?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for the lovely introduction to both of you, Banta Kaliko and Rosie. I have to admit I'm a bit nervous, and I hope I don't scramble the words too much or forget half the things I want to say. I think that was something I put into the emails, and there are maybe two things I want to pick out. Of me being trans, this has had a big impact. Was really like a two-staged event, and the second one was, the first one was like breaking the shell, and the second, a few weeks later, like leaving the egg, and it relieved me. It was joyous and fearful, so a mix, but finally it felt like I was free. I realized what it was, what I felt 40 years in my life, and I couldn't express to myself, or yeah, it was like I knew the word trans, I knew the definition, but in this very moment, it was really a moment. It was filled with life, and I've been staring at it my whole life and couldn't understand it. And this event, yeah, gave me some confidence that there are other things I could experience, or like now I lose the words, discover, yeah, like maybe sometimes dukkha, maybe I will understand it, maybe this life, maybe another, I don't know, but this was really impactful from the trans word to my Buddhist practice. And some other thing is voice therapy. I've learned in meditation and retreats how to observe inside, in my body, in my mind, certain things, and how to report and express them. And this helped me a lot in voice therapy, to observe what happens in this little area here, and also what my feelings, my mind is doing with my voice, and vice versa. I learned that my voice is like a probe to my mind. It was very fascinating. And what I learned, or what I had to do every session with my therapist was, at the beginning, I had to evaluate myself, my voice, my whole week. Yeah, we meet on a weekly basis, and I just tell what happened. And there was one time I told what went good, and then immediately jumped to all the bad things, or I think where I can improve and so on. And he said to me, stop, go back to the good thing, and don't make yourself bad all the time. Tell me the good thing and then pause. So that was very incredible. I really had to be reminded that I can be happy for things I achieved, how little they may be. And yeah. And then he gave me homework, like every week, and this time it was, I have to keep a journal, and every day I have to write at least 3 positive things about my voice that I recognized a day, and at most 1 negative thing. that was very incredible because my focus shifted to all the positive things I experience throughout the day, and I throw away them and don't use them. It was very amazing. So I recognized more and more all the positive things, and even better, when I recognized something negative, I had always something positive coming out from that. So even these negative events have something good for me. So, and this I could take back to my meditation practice, where I recognized I did the same things. I always focus on the bad things, on the negative things, mind going astray. But the good thing is when it goes astray and I recognize it, it's good. I can be happy and I can bring the mind back. And if it is back to the object, that's something good. I can be happy about that. So this is like a little bit of cross-pollination between things I learned through my transition journey and things I learned in my Buddhist practice. Yeah, yes, like.
Are you
A lot.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for your comment. Anybody else?
Jacob, would you like to go next?
Sure. I don't know, I find the question of like trans identity and Buddhist identity a bit abstract, but just generally speaking of being a Buddhist and being trans, I find that they kind of what's the word for it? There's a kind of God, what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, anyway, there are aspects of being trans that make being a Buddhist easier, and there are aspects of being a Buddhist that help with some aspects of being trans. For example, with gender dysphoria, for example, the Buddhist idea of rebirth, I find that takes some of the urgency out of it, because everyone's been a man and a woman at some point, right? And nobody is a man or a woman forever, even if it doesn't change in this life, it might in the next. And I find that idea just removes a lot of the urgency out of dysphoria. And on the flip side, being a trans person who is a Buddhist, I find some of the concepts of like calllessness or anatta, or whatever you want to call it, it's a bit easier to I find, to get my head around questions about identity, because I spent so much time contemplating my identity that there are so many aspects of identity that other people might not even realize that they're there. Like most cis people don't even know that they have a gender identity. But then if you tell, if you even suggest to the average cisgender man that he's not masculine, then you get a reaction immediately, but they don't even realize that sort of identity is there. So yeah, that's how I find that the experience of being trans and Buddhist goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it's interesting, the relationship between trans and Buddhism, especially interesting to me because I was born in 1951, and by 1961 to 1963, I realized that there was something really wrong with me. Of course, later on, I found out that wasn't true, but at the time, having internalized a tremendous amount of societal hate, including religious bigotry and bias. I think that concurrently with trying to discover who I was also trying to figure out why I was so heavily judged, why I wanted to kill myself at some point, irrationally so, but only because of what I've been told by my society. So as I developed as a trans woman, I think I was looking for a place to belong that would not judge me. And from a very early point in my life, I started to realize that maybe Buddhism was that non-judgmental place where I could find refuge. It took me a long time, mainly because I had to evict the internalized judgment of the society I had grown up in. Then I found Buddhism and I was thrilled that I was there. But then I realized through my discussions on Pseudo Central that it was there, and I couldn't understand it. I was completely confused by what Buddhism said and how the people expressed their Buddhism. And I don't think it's a secret that there's a tremendous amount of male-dominated sort of, if not prejudice, just kind of a nonchalance about it. You know, I've even challenged some of those people to put on a dress and go to Walmart to see how secure in their Buddhism they were. But, you know, even that didn't get a laugh, which I was kind of sorry for. But so that's what I think this is an important discussion, because for those of us in Pseudo Central, I think we've experienced the same kind, at least I'd like to hear from you about the same kind of nonchalance, or maybe not judgment, it's not the right word, because it wouldn't be right for a Buddhist to sound judgmental, of course, especially not in print. But in trying to explain some of the problems of being trans, or at least expressing that in the forums, I have gotten, I would say, maybe occasionally some moderate support, but on the whole, a lot of the men, which is the dominant gender or sex in the forums, have just seemed either confused, or I've even had somebody ask me, well, why is that important? I'm like, well, because I seem to be one of the only people here, and I think it's important that you know why I'm here and how I feel about it. I always thought that as a person who walked the middle path between male and female, and I do also identify as two-spirit, even though that's kind of like it's a very controversial expression, because some people say Native Americans own the word. I personally think that anybody who's experienced the condition of being two-spirited should be able to use that word in a description of themselves. But even trying to describe myself as walking the middle path in Buddhism has met with some kind of, I don't know, complete lack of understanding. And perhaps it's about people who are born cis don't really understand what it's like to be in the middle. And because I have an experience in being a DJ, I could talk at length forever. So I'm going to shut up now and let you guys talk. Please.
Thank you. And I really appreciated everybody's shares. It was really great to hear everyone's different opinions. And so, and also, because I came late in the game, I didn't get to share I have so many different bios. And so thank you so much for having me, because Bhante, there was you and my assistant going, this person's trying to get in touch with you. So I'm really glad that we were able to connect and I get to be here with you. So yeah, my pronouns are he and they. There's no preference. That's just what they are. I'm here on Ohlone land in Oakland, California, unceded Ohlone territory, where I'm beginning to understand the languages Chochenyo, even though there were still Chochenyo here in the region. For anyone who's audioing this, listening to this audio, I'm an African American, brown skin, currently with a beard and COVID hair. I can't remember the last time my hair was this long. And yes, I'm also, my practice is within the Theravada tradition, the middle path. I am a member of the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, California, also teacher there, taken classes at Spirit Rocks, have gone through the Dharma leadership and dedicated practitioner programs, and I've taught there. I actually brought to both centers the first trans events. So I started in this area, the first trans meditation group, and that came out of being in a large group at Spirit Rock. There were maybe a little over 100 of us, where many people checked trans. And when we did affinity groups and it came time to connect in our little groups, and there could be political, talking about mindfulness, whatever it was, and there was an LGBT group and a trans group, I found myself sitting alone exposed in this cafeteria, and having this experience of what it also means for some of us. Just the identities didn't match. So there were lots of people who said they were trans, but nobody was actually, I think lots of people were trying it on, though there have been people who have transitioned. Just want to name that there is a difference between making a medical change and not. And you don't have, and there's no one way to be trans, right? There's absolutely no one way. This idea of, I want to just tap on some of the things that were said. This idea, the gender dysphoria is exactly what society has. I have no problem. There's nothing confusing to me about my gender. I'm not, for me personally, I was born in the right body. I needed to live my experience in a female body for whatever karma I had to deal with from my past lives. And it was interesting coming shortly after I started taking testosterone is when I found myself at the East Bay Meditation Center. Spring Washam was teaching and she was talking about reincarnation. And I realized this was one of the reincarnations in my experience, was this transition to male expressive transmasculine person. And I was so grateful. There were people, somebody handed me a book on Michael Dillon really early, so I was able to reach back and have an ancestor that I could walk with as I was working with spiritual centers, particularly Buddhist centers, on creating space, creating language, bathroom space, private space, whatever was needed in order for trans people to be accepted in those communities. And the last thing I'll say, because there's so many of us. I remember, and thank you, Rosie, because you reminded me of like this no body, no self that I first started hearing about. And the way that has showed up for me is cis white males letting all the, and in some cases, other males of color sometimes too, letting practitioners know that there is no body, no self. We go through this talk, go through this practice, and using it as a way to hold power. Like if a person of color should say, I'm feeling challenged and I'm having racist issues. Well, why? There is no body. You're caught up in your blah, blah, blah. And so how that has been a microaggression, and in some cases macroaggression, also keeping women out of leadership. So thanks for bringing that in, because I think that it's a question that comes up frequently. How does nobody, no self play into the idea of being trans, play into the idea of being female? Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. Hopefully I didn't talk too long. I don't have to start using a timer.
No, there's no time limit. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, I think that you make a valid point, that this is one of the essential points that we all end up dealing with in Buddhism is the thing about having a self or no self. well, first of all, everybody has a self, but it's how you regard yourself in terms of, in the context of your gender identity or sexual preference or whatever. It does seem like, however, we've been called upon more to abandon concepts of self and so forth, just because ourselves are so outstanding in the community. But at the same time, I think that first they have to be validated by the community we're in before we can abandon them, or at least understood and validated by the community, because everybody has one. There's nobody without one. But Buddhism, to me, is how I view it, how I see it, what I do with it, my relationship with it. And admittedly, I think it gets kind of muddy because, there's the internal and the external. Then there's relationship with other people, and other people largely ensconced in personality and self, but advise us not to be. So I think that it's a really important thing to talk about, validation. And, that's, in a sense, I think that's what this is about. And first of all, it's about us validating each other, which is a great starting point, and then emerging as kind of a force in the Buddhist community to say, well, we don't have greater selves or weirder selves or more important selves than everybody else. We'd like it if ourselves could be understood in the context that they exist both in the real world and in Buddhism. So, Jacob, are you with us? Would you like to say something about that?
I think I just find it interesting that people kind of used the teachings weaponized against trans identities, but like I've never come across anyone with an actual solution. Because like, okay, well, if you're gonna say that like, people shouldn't transition because there's no self or whatever, like what's the solution? Am I going to get closer to understanding not self by pretending that I'm not trans? I mean, clearly that's not the case, right? Like, just pretending that you don't have any kind of identity isn't going to get you any closer to understanding the teaching itself. So, I mean, I don't really see any kind of validity to that kind of weaponization of the Dhamma.
Yeah, so Jacob, I am like just one of many trans teachers, and it begins there and then with allies. But I just want you to know it's happening. It is happening.
Well, it's happening, I think, in a small way, because we've been invited by the wonderful Bhante Calico to actually have a voice, which will exist in perpetuity. And perhaps this is a thing that will grow. I think when I found out there were only 5 or 6 people out of the entire Buddhist community, or the Rainbodhi group, who were fearless enough to show themselves and use their voices to emerge from a place of oppression and fearfulness, I was astounded, because not having a real sense of what Buddhist trans people are all over the world, we do know a few things about it. And one is that even female Buddhists are still having a hard time achieving equality in terms of ordination. So, in terms of that paradigm, we still lag far behind. And I just think it's really important that we're here and that we're using our voices to say that we have a place. And, part of the problem also, I believe, is in some of the historical records that are relied upon in which we did not exist. Because in some of my interactions with people online, I would try to find out, well, how did Buddha feel about women? Well, how did he feel? There were no trans people in Buddha's time, so how would Buddha have related to a trans person? And of course, there were no answers to that, because there's not much interest in finding that out in the general community. But I think it was a sore point with me. I couldn't find myself there. I had several passionate discussions and I got some really good answers. But in the end, I felt a little abandoned by the community in that I felt kind of irrelevant. And thanks to Bhante Akaliko, I no longer feel that way. I think that this is an important thing. And I think it's important that we continue to use our voices to speak out, not in fear, and with some self-respect and some, I don't want to use the word pride, but a certain amount of realization of the place that we hold in Buddhism and the Buddhist community in general. Teresa?
Yeah. What I find very interesting is the question: what would the Buddha, what was the Buddha's stance on being trans or transgender people? That was something I struggled a lot with in the beginning. When I asked myself, what should I do? Will I transition medically, whatever? And I asked these questions a lot to myself and read the suttas and so on, and there are no answers to that question. And I turned it around and I asked myself, what would happen if I transition medically? Would I be less human? No. I still can practice sila, I still can meditate, I'm still able to do my whole practice as before. It just, I change the hormones and maybe, yeah, I don't know what in the future. And I still got this brain and my mind, and I'm on estrogen for a year now, over a year now. And I'm not more delusional or less than before. I'm still this nearly same human being, and I can develop, and that's the main point for me.
Absolutely. We are the same people we were before, and I think it's important that what gender identity is about is how we view ourselves primarily, and then how we express that, not what's between our legs or, you know, what our feminine mannerisms are, even our voices to some degree, because my voice can get really low. And honestly, sometimes I use that to mess with people because I know it's a terrible thing. I can do it for you now, but I'm afraid to ruin my self-image.
And there are women with deep voices, right? There are women who have been singing bass, and so what we get to do is bust out the idea of, you know, break the barriers around gender as well, in the ways that we present, you know, in the ways that we sound. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in.
No, absolutely. There's a woman who died. She used to have she used to be on the Golden Girls, and her name was Maud.
Yes, I remember Maud.
Yeah. And she had a voice deeper than some of us, and she was a large woman too. So in a way, she's a role model for me. Plus her attitude. She didn't take no crap. You know, I know some of you probably aren't familiar with the program, but yes, there are examples. You know, that's an interesting thing is the stereotypes that are inflicted upon us continually by the society we grew up in, and then the ones we've internalized. Because even with my own identity, I go, well, a woman wouldn't talk like this, you know. I mean, this is not how a woman talks. I mean, that invalidates me immediately. And so, but you know what? What's a woman? What's a man? What is feminine? What is masculine? You know, I looked feminine and masculine up in the dictionary, and the definition for masculine is all things not feminine. And the definition for feminine is all things not masculine. And
which invalidates it all.
It's kind of, it leaves it completely relative to the society that, you know, that we exist in, which is, again, highly relative too, because we know that even in indigenous cultures, the two-spirited people who have a noble place in history often express a wide variety of male and female characteristics, and you know, which to me indicates quite a bit of a balance in personality. But not in most societies. We still hold on to those stereotypes, and it's a lot about being objectified as the gender we are, because sexual objectification continues as an oppressive factor in most societies. And I have to say, it's a lovely beard.
It's work now. You have to do things now. So misogyny, one of the things I teach is that misogyny is at the foundation of transphobia, homophobia, because of this idea that, the feminine, which is obviously a threat to some people who are cisgendered. The idea that someone who is born a cis male would show any signs of femininity is only a threat to this male idea, this what we call toxic masculinity. And in that way, so not only is it a threat for men to show any sign of femininity, even cisgender straight men receive that. Then we have the invisibilizing of what happens to trans men who come out of female bodies. They're just like ignored. It's not just about blending in, right, and passing. It's also about the ways that the traumas of being in a woman's body are suddenly no longer relevant, where many trans men still carry that and can, and also experience different levels of suicide ideation, I believe is the word. And it's not, so I think, the last thing I want to say, just reflecting on what you're all saying, is media, religion, governments, so they have these strict identities, and there are different ways of stripping us of our humanity. There's different ways of the idea. Sorry, I remember when Kris Jenner, is that what's her new name? I think I got her name wrong. Jenner. Okay, so we know who Jenner is. So sorry. When she came out on the cover of Vogue in a skimpy outfit and our hands tied behind her back. Caitlin, thank you. Sorry, my deepest apologies. I would never show that to anybody. It was the epitome of what women have to struggle with, in order, right? Just the way their hands would touch, her hands would, and so, of course, trans women are because you're never gonna meet that ideal of the magazine.
That's right. That's
damn magazine, which nobody is.
Right. Yes, thank you. That speaks exactly to my point, that there's a feminine ideal and a masculine ideal that is held up for everyone. And if we internalize those perfect images and then try to live up to them, we're going to have a serious self-esteem problem. So, and another thing that you said that was awesome was how it is not recognized that we carry the oppression and the suffering of both sexes or genders with us as we progress through this life. And I think I tried to make that point in the forum. I tried to say that, we know what it's like to be men and women. We know how hard that is. There are a very small group of people who contain that wisdom, Oh, yes.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to distract you.
No. But anyway, I think it's an important point that, we live in places that expect things from us. And by the way, to your comment about power, and I've always envisioned this as a pyramid with white men at the top and perhaps black men. I'm just generalizing, not trying to leave out anybody's oppression. But it's white men, black men, white women, black women, men and women of color. And then, we're at the bottom. And so if a woman wants to accede to the top of the pyramid, it's understandable in a societal context. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a man with all that power based on their penis? But if you're a man born with a penis and you openly say, I'm giving that up, then that says a lot about you, because you don't really appreciate the power that was given you through your organ. So I mean, it's just a very dramatic way in which I envision male dominance and its trickle down effect on sex and gender that follows it. I don't know. Does anybody think I'm crazy?
I just want to be clear that it's white men and white women. That
Okay.
whiteness still,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that Black men can't cause harm to white women, right? There's still the misogyny that could happen from a Black male perspective, but when it comes to power, it's still a white dominated
I understand
society.
that completely.
Thank
and
you.
you're right.
Yeah.
And I apologize for
Oh yeah, no need, because I understand where you're coming from. So
okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. But we do understand each other in terms of the sort of power structure that exists that, you know, if you want to move up the power structure, well, we kind of get that, you know. That's why so many people thought, well, you know, of course you want to have a sex change as a woman. You want to, you know, you want to be a man. Makes sense, right? But what man in their right mind would rather think at all? Right. I mean, come on, seriously. And it appears we're down to 3. So, Teresa, did you have anything to add? Teresa?
Was it to me?
Yes, dear.
I think I can only add a little bit from my microenvironment. I mean, this was more like ground politics, I think. And my day-to-day experience in my daily work with my family and so on, I feel very accepted and understood. It's quite amazing, but I know that it's not for everybody like this. Yeah, most trans people face much more trouble, violence, rejection, and for me, maybe I'm very lucky with blending in very well, and yeah, I don't know. So with all these power structures and like this, it's out of reach for me, I think. But in my little world, the few people I know from person to person, that's very welcoming. But it's only my little sphere, I think.
I think that yes, and I think that what you're talking about, no offense, is if you have white privilege, you don't notice oppression. And I'm a white person too, but I'm in contact with it. You know, I'm in contact with the sort of white privilege that I have, and which indicates I really don't know a lot. There's a lot of oppression, and I regret that. And that's why I think it's important to have love here. That's why I wish, you know, the weird thing about New Mexico is there's only like maybe, I don't know, 10 Black people here. I don't know.
It seems like that. I think, yeah, the population is like 6% or something. Yeah.
Real, yeah.
I've been out there a lot.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So,
yeah,
you know,
I love it there.
Yeah, there are very few. And I regret that too, because I like to have more contact with, you know, people of all kinds of diversity. And there's a lot here, but that's one thing that isn't here for some reason. I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah. So talk about white privilege in Buddhism, if you like. If you don't want to, that's fine too. No pressure.
I wanted to talk about, thank you, Teresa, because I wanted to talk about how, I remember walking into one of the hospitals here, Kaiser is like a big hospital thing, whatever, I was going in for a checkup, and there were 2 trans masculines. So I'm not going to say whether they were trans men or female identified. So just trans masculine people from my appearance. And I looked up at them and I said, you have no idea how amazing it is to see you here. Like, it's a big deal for two like butch trans masculine people to be behind a counter. And they said, what? They were like, we just walked up here and took this job. And all I could think about were all the people who died for them to be able to get that job. Exactly. For all the people who continue to be beat up, for other nurses who probably lost positions because maybe somebody found out they were lesbian, for any nurse who, or admin person who was male and was showing femininity and lost their job. And so just to remember that none of us just got here, right? I didn't just get here. Certainly there were transcestors and Black, trans African, trans, ancestors who did the work so that we can celebrate you being having it like this, Teresa, because it's something to celebrate, but we need you not to forget how you got there. Like why it's easy. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Good point. Excellent point. Nothing to add, Teresa? No pressure. I was just asking. I didn't mean that you had to say something.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Was your lives as trans people better or more oppressed before you became Buddhist? How much of a difference in your integration and your feeling of acceptance and hopefulness come from Buddhism, or is it the same as it was?
I don't think I didn't get that. It's lagging.
You're frozen. You were frozen,
yes.
Teresa. Sorry.
So no, I don't think I got the question right. So
the question. Let me say it again. The question is: was your suffering greater to it as, or did Buddhism lessen your suffering as a trans person? Is it better now?
So I don't know for how long I've been a Buddhist now, but being or realizing being trans is quite fresh for me because it happened in October 2019. And I have to say the suffering I experienced was different before. And it was more like I felt a numbness, but I couldn't realize it. And I presented very in between female, male, and I got a lot of name calling and bad things, but also admiration for that, for the bravery or whatever. And after realizing what's wrong, it shifted a lot. I felt much more pain, but it was something I could work with. So I'm not like helpless, yeah. But I know a little bit more where it's coming from, and that I can do something, that I can work with it. So it's different. I think sometimes it's more pain I feel, but at the same time, I'm very happy, more happy than before. And it feels like I'm blossoming now, and I'm able to face myself with compassion. I was not able to do that before, and now I can look at myself in a very different way, with much more positivity.
Well, I think that you may. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, I think I'm done. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that's a very important point. Is our awareness of compassion that first needs to be directed towards ourselves, I think, before we can extend it to others. A couple other things the concepts that I was introduced to that's helped me a lot in Buddhism. One is, and I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but it's a good study topic, that's dependent origination. Mm-hmm. And the other one is inherent emptiness, because at some point I stopped looking at myself as if I was set apart, or if I was a separate entity, or if I was completely responsible for my existence at this point. Mm-hmm. And I think you sound like you're familiar with that left.
Oh, because I'm smiling.
Well,
I'm smiling. I'm smiling also because I feel like the way that I've been supported by my Buddhist practice is similarly to some of what Teresa was saying, which is the practice of self-kindness. So one of my studies is in mindful self-compassion, program by Kristen Neff and Chris Germer out here, of course, comes out of the Buddhist tradition, where we're focusing on teaching people to be kinder to themselves. So what happens for me with Buddhism is I can meet what I didn't know with a certain of grace and care versus what would have been, why didn't I know, or arguing because I think I knew. Like, I don't have to be so solid in knowing, but it allows me to be open to learning in a whole different way. So whether it's about me, whether it's about whether it's about me as a trans person or the Black community or the Buddhist community, and meeting people with a greater sense of kindness that I didn't receive when I showed up in ignorance around something. So it's my practice to say, oh, you didn't know that? Okay, that's cool. Guess what? We weren't supposed to know what we didn't know, right? We weren't taught these things. We're doing these land acknowledgements because we weren't taught to we were taught to ignore those things. We were taught to ignore misogyny. We were taught to ignore these gender blah, blah, blah transgressions. And so being able to name them, being able to hear criticism, I think all of that comes from the beautiful practice that the Buddha, who I refer to as they, since I don't see them naming their identity anywhere, which is sort of, really throws people off, but that's okay. Yeah, I feel like, at the base of his teachings was not just how can we be aware and not just accept, but even be loving of what shows up. We may need to transform it, right? But how can we meet it with this, you may have seen, I love Tara Brach, poor baby, you didn't know this, or this hurts. How can we meet each other and ourselves from there? Yeah.
Excellent.
And I didn't answer your second question because I can't remember it. Sorry.
That's all right. I've been told that it's about time to wrap things up. Amazingly, we've been talking for an hour and 13 minutes now. It's just gone by wow. What a fascinating discussion, and truly great to have seen your faces and hear what you have to say. I really hope that this will not be the last time and that we can all stay in touch with each other. And I look forward to seeing the responses that we get and when this recording is made, is published. But thank you again so much. And thank you, Bhante Akaliko, for everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for allowing me to be here to listen and learn and understand a little bit more about the experiences of our gender diverse community in Buddhism. And I'd just like to thank you all individually. So Teresa, I really appreciated your honesty and your the insights into your personal life, which you shared. So thank you for that. Jacob, who had to leave because of time constraints, it was very good of him to come along. I don't think that he was entirely comfortable being here today, and he pushed through that. And so sometimes that kind of showing up is a real challenge, and I'd like to acknowledge that. And Lev, thank you for your expertise and for your insights that you shared. And Rosie, thank you for being the hostess with the mostess, and I really appreciate your willingness to take on that role.
I enjoy it.
And so thank you for helping us make visible really important members of our community. And in the description for this YouTube video, I'll be providing some resources, including a trans competence guide for meditation and Buddhist organizations, as well as the very wonderful Transcending Trans Buddhist Voices anthology, which is a wonderful read. and some other things as well. And so just to dedicate the merit of the Dharma discussion that we've had here today to the liberation of all beings, and may all of our diverse beings that we have in our community, here, seen and unseen, past, present and future, may they all be safe, may they all be free from fear, and may they all find true happiness and liberation.
Amen.
And thanks so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
And I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye. See ya.